Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. At the November 2010 election, the Madison County, Illinois State's Attorney William Mudge was elected to be a circuit judge in the Illinois Third Judicial Circuit. The County Board Chairman, Alan Dunstan, appointed Tom Gibbons, an assistant state's attorney, to replace Mr. Mudge. As Madison County approaches its 2012 county election cycle, Amy Sholar of Godfrey, Illinois, has stepped forward and announced she's running for the job of state's attorney. Ms. Sholar is an Alton attorney who, during law school, worked for the state's attorney's office. Following law school, she worked for the City of Alton, handling real estate acquisitions and zoning matters. Ms. Sholar began private practice in 2004. She handles criminal defense and family litigation. Amy Sholar, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you.
So you've been in the office before.
Yes.
Now you want to go back as the head.
Yes, a little different role. I started out as an intern in the state's attorney's office during law school. So yes, I'm moving on to a different realm now.
Well, let's just talk about why. I mean, why do you want to do that particular function? Is it not being done well enough by the current staff?
I'm interested in a different focus for the office. My focus would shift on proactive issues. The law has typically been very reactive to crime and issues. What I would like to see happen is a proactive approach. There are various different groups of offices in the state's attorney's office besides the misdemeanor and felony division, which is the ones that most people are familiar with. I would like to see more focus and emphasis be placed on the child support division, the juvenile abuse and neglect division. I would also like to see the misdemeanor division be revamped to deal with some of the pressing issues like drug abuse. I'm also very interested in trying out some new programs, things like dealing with exploitation of the elderly, animal abuse, some of the various issues that we face. My hope is that if we try these things, if we are proactive in these various other divisions, then we're going to stop some of the felony crimes before they occur so that we can use our resources in a different manner and ultimately prevent crime.
Mm-hmm. How do you see these programs that you want to emphasize as having an impact on the broader area of crime?
Well, I'm a single working mother. I know how single working mothers deal with the issues that they face each and every day. Any single parent who's dealing with issues in the child support division and not getting their child support can tell you that puts a burden on families. I think it's important for single parents to get their child support. So if we can help single working parents get their child support, and that's what the state's attorney's office does, they're the chief child support enforcement agency, then we can really make an impact for families. I think it'll help parents in terms of raising children. It'll give them more resources and hopefully the ability to be with their children more often rather than work 2 or 3 jobs to put food on the table. And I think that most of the studies will show that if parents are more involved with their children, that's going to help in terms of the children's education and their upbringing.
Has this been an issue in Madison County, the collection and distribution of child care money?
Unfortunately, I think that the issue of child support enforcement is an issue across the country. Madison County has a very large docket that deals with child support enforcement. Notoriously, I've heard complaints from clients that are my clients in family cases or in criminal cases that it's just too slow, that the process is too slow and it takes much too long to get child support to the families.
Can you briefly describe this process?
Well, generally, a person can sign up, or if they're on some type of public assistance, then they would immediately be eligible for the child support enforcement. It is a free attorney. There are a number of attorneys that serve on that docket now. Those folks then...
Are they advocates for the child or for the
Well,
the custodial parent?
They actually represent the Department of Health and Family Services. So it's an effort to help the taxpayers to get back money that's spent on things like Medicaid and public assistance, food stamps. However, it's also helping those parents too. So indirectly, it's assisting them and the children. So it's a really good program. The problem is that it's very bogged down because there are a number of people using that. So I would like to see more of our resources spent in that division. If we need staffing levels increased, I would be willing to do that. So I think that, in the past, that division has been treated as an afterthought, and I really think it needs to be on the forefront.
Mm-hmm. Do you say that family court is on the afterthought part, or is that taken care of and well funded?
Well, in terms of family court, it's not necessarily family court. The state's attorney's office is involved in a juvenile abuse and neglect docket. When children in the county, when there are allegations of abuse and neglect, the state's attorney's office can bring a petition. They work with DCFS and various agencies to do this. Again, it is a very bogged down docket, and of course, this is the safety of children in our community. So I would like to see more of our resources spent on those cases as well. I actually worked on that docket as a juvenile abuse and neglect public defender while I was in private practice. So I've spent about 5 years on that docket. Mm-hmm. That docket was not a well-paying docket in terms of private practice, but it was very important to me because what my job was to either represent parents or represent the children, because everyone was entitled to an attorney. And what we did was work to ensure the safety of children. And even if you represented the parents, your goal was to reunify families and help families move on from whatever trauma that they may have gone through. And I felt that that was one of the most worthwhile things that I've ever done in my career. And I do know from a hands-on position of what we can do to make that better. So one of the things that I want to do is add additional staffing to that. Now, the question that people ask is, well, how are you going to afford to do that? We have tight budget constraints. I think that we can start reallocating positions within the state's attorney's office. So we won't necessarily have to hire new help, but we can use the existing resources we have and just shift them to those dockets.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say crowded docket, takes forever to get some results. This sort of sounds like not enough judges. How many judges are in the family docket?
I believe currently, and it varies from time to time, but for certain, we have 3 full-time family court judges. We also have judges then that focus on orders of protection. We have judges that focus on child support division. So at any given time, you're looking at 3 to 5 judges. And yes,
is that enough, or are you saying that they simply don't have the time to deal with the magnitude of cases?
I don't think that that's enough, but obviously that's not an issue that as state's attorney,
right.
I can't deal with that. But what I can try to do is make their job a little easier. We can try to do as much of the front end work as possible and move cases as quickly as we can through the child support and juvenile abuse and neglect docket. Some of the complaints that I have across the board in terms of the cases that I hear from people is that the judicial system is slow and tedious. And while I can't make that perfect, I can certainly try to remedy that situation.
Mm-hmm. Now, okay, you said that the child support docket's important to you. What other?
Juvenile abuse and neglect, obviously, and the juvenile delinquency docket.
Abuse, how serious of a problem is that?
Oh, we have serious issues with juvenile abuse and neglect in this county. Generally, the attention is not placed on that division unless, of course, you have a high-profile case where a child is usually murdered by a parent or a paramour of a parent. Again, I think that there are some proactive approaches that we can take in working with DCFS to help cut down on the number of cases that are filed every year. And also, many of these folks that end up in the system ultimately go on to the misdemeanor docket or the felony docket because there are crimes that are committed as a result of poor family structure and the types of issues that they're facing. And there's always drug abuse, or almost always drug abuse involved in these types of cases. So they're all very interconnected. And I think if we can focus in a holistic approach, that hopefully the goal would be to cut down on the number of felony cases that we file each year in Madison County. Right now, we file about 3,000 felony cases each and every year in Madison County. And while that may seem like a lot, we do need to reduce it, but we also file over 1,000 juvenile abuse and neglect petitions every year. We also have hundreds, if not thousands, of child support enforcement cases. So I'm looking at this position as not just chief law enforcement officer, which is important, certainly, but as a goal to protect families in a holistic approach.
Mm-hmm. What about the drug court? What's your position on that?
I think the drug court is a very useful tool, particularly the Track 1 program. There's a Track 1 program and a Track 2 program.
Explain the tracks.
I'll try to briefly explain them. Track 1 program is generally the lesser offenses. It's folks who are just new to the system. They are receiving essentially a suspended sentence. Once they complete the program, then there's nothing on their record, essentially. Track 2 is a little bit different. Those are generally people with more severe problems or prior history, and they're looking at a conviction on their record, but it keeps them out of jail. Mm-hmm. And that's a simplified approach. What I find because I have done criminal defense work as well as served as a prosecutor, what I find is that many of my clients who are drug abusers are having such a difficult time finding the treatment that they need. We have clients, particularly with the heroin issue, who literally we make them sit in jail. I mean, their family wants them in jail until we can find an open bed for them to receive treatment. So part of the problems with drug court is not necessarily the structure of the court, but the lack of treatment options. And of course, that's a financial issue as well.
You just hit on a really hot button issue of this program. We've done a series of programs here about the heroin issue, both here in Illinois and over in Missouri. And I was sitting right here with the coroner of Madison County, mm-hmm. and we were doing just a standard interview. Oh, what does a coroner do, et cetera. And then we came to that last 5 minutes. I says, is there anything else you want to talk about? And all of a sudden, boom, he dumps this whole thing about all these people who are dying of heroin. And it was like, whoa. I mean, I didn't know that this was happening. And we've done shows since then, and so that's why I would like you to address, as the chief law enforcement officer of a good-sized county like Madison County, yes, what your attitude would be towards the heroin, what I call epidemic.
I believe it is an epidemic. I noticed it about 4 or 5 years ago. My clients, they were coming to me, and I asked my clients, what is your drug of choice if they've been charged with a drug crime? And I kept hearing heroin. And in the most unlikely of places, middle-aged women who had never used any drugs in their life. And it was shocking to me. So we have a serious epidemic, and it's prevalent in all socioeconomic classes. It doesn't know gender, it doesn't know sex, it doesn't know economic classes.
So you're talking about users, not distributors.
I'm talking about users at this point in time. My understanding from law enforcement is that most of the distribution of heroin is coming from North St. Louis. I think that, again, we need to take a holistic approach. We need to look at the supply and we need to look at the demand. With the supply, we're going to have to work with coroners, drug enforcement agencies across the state and within the state of Missouri, and federally as well. Mm-hmm. Additionally, we've got to look at the supply. One of the interesting things that I think we need to start tackling is most of the heroin users start out taking prescription painkillers, things like Vicodin, OxyContin. And at some point in time, that prescription use can escalate into a heroin use because it's readily available and usually it's fairly cheap. I've been told...
That's the shocking part to me, is just, I've had people sit right here and say, oh, well, when they can't afford to buy this illicit OxyContin or hydrocodone, well, I tell you what, I got something cheaper for you. Here you go. How about some heroin? I was like, what?
Yeah, it's not something that you would think would be mainstream, and you can't imagine that it would be cheaper than prescription pills, but my clients and the studies are showing that that's actually the case. What I've been told is that Vicodin use is prevalent in Madison County, particularly in Alton in our area. So we've got to start looking, I think, at doctors, meeting with the doctors, the pharmacists, and coming up with a way to decrease those uses so that we then ultimately can stop the use of heroin. We've got to get to children, obviously, too. In the schools at very young ages, we've got to educate children and families, because this is a highly addictive drug. The
heroin, you mean?
The heroin
Yeah.
is a highly addictive drug. It's a situation where I've had folks who tell me that they used it one time and immediately were addicted and have given up jobs, lost families, lost their livelihood. So it's a real serious problem, and one that we need to tackle. But again, I believe that our approach to everything should be a holistic approach. And I also believe that we should be proactive rather than reactive. People say to me all the time.
Proactive in what way do you see this?
I always tell people the law is typically reactive. We have to wait until a crime is committed before we can react. That's not good enough for most people. Most people say, I'm sorry, but I don't want to wait until a crime is committed against me. So the way to deal with crimes is to deal with the issues that sometimes cause the underlying issues, things like lack of employment, drug use, some of the different problems that families face that lead people to these places in their lives where they're more likely to commit a crime. So if we can try to stop this, then we can stop the felony, we can stop the violent crimes in Madison County, and hopefully we can cut down on the drug abuse that we have. We have serious crimes, and I don't want to take those lightly. I mean, I plan on enforcing the law. That's our goal. But I also want to help families. That is my job. I see my job as protecting families in Madison County.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny. I've been around Madison County for a long time, and I remember when the courthouse was this sleepy little place where, a big crime was drunk driving. And then I went off to the Navy, and when I came back, I think that week when I came back from the Navy, there was like 2 daylight robberies at a bank. Madison County has changed quite a bit. I'm not sure how a holistic approach, as opposed to a good spanking.
Well, I'm not opposed to good spankings either. One of the things that we really need to talk about is that if we file 3,000 felonies a year, we're likely to only see 20 of those cases ever go to trial.
Really?
Yes, and that's an estimate. Most cases are plea bargained out. Mm-hmm. They are pled out very early in the game, and we go on. So no, we're not tough enough. Not enough jail sentences imposed, and I'm going to be asking for jail time as state's attorney.
There's not that much jail space, though. I mean, it's interesting, when they built the new Madison County jail years ago,
right.
It was huge. It didn't take long before it filled up. I think they even added on another section to it. It didn't take long until that was filled up. And of course, I understand that most Illinois prisons are filled to capacity to the point where they have to turn
It's a balancing
people loose.
act. It's a balancing act. But in my job, my position is going to be that the most serious felony cases are immediately sent to a trial division. Mm-hmm. I believe that we need to start trying cases. I personally have tried cases. I enjoy being in the courtroom. I have vowed that if I'm the state's attorney, that I'm going to be spending my time in the courtroom. You will see me in a child support division, hopefully, and you will see me in the felony courtroom as well. I've also vowed that I will try some cases, which will be the first state's attorney to do so in 30 years.
What kind of cases do you think that you would enter into?
Some of the most challenging cases are the sex abuse cases, and they're challenging in terms of the courtroom, the logistics of the courtroom, and they're also challenging in terms of the victimology. I would be interested in doing those type of cases. I would also be interested in murder cases or other lesser cases in terms of battery, misdemeanors, those type of things. It's very difficult with such a large state's attorney's office with so many employees and everything to try cases on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. In smaller counties, the state's attorneys are the only ones trying cases usually. But I would at least like to get in the courtroom every now and then. I went to school to be a lawyer. I love being a lawyer, and I want to continue to do that.
You mentioned elder abuse as well. Is that a serious problem?
I find that to be a very serious problem.
Describe the problem.
I've worked as guardian ad litem for disabled adults in many cases.
What does that mean?
That means that I've been appointed by the court to represent the interest of disabled adults. Okay. And many times what we're seeing is family members who are either exploiting the elderly person financially or even sometimes it rises to the level of physical abuse.
Their own children.
Their
or
own relatives.
aunts, or nephews.
It varies from family to family, but we are finding that it's a caregiver type who does that. I have
What
had...
sort of abuse are we talking about? I mean, like, just not being nice, swearing, or are we talking about slapping people around, burning them with cigarettes? I mean, what are we...
We're talking about, in terms of the physical nature, you see a lot of neglect. Just not providing fundamental care for the disabled adults. Things like food, the basic fundamental care that these folks need. What I'm also seeing a lot of is that family members are raiding their bank accounts and essentially using the money for their own personal purpose. And the problem that we have...
Do they have that legal right to do that?
Well, some of them do it legally and some of them don't do it legally. Some of them will go in either through a power of attorney or through, if the disabled adult has put them on their bank accounts or something. They're basically manipulating an elderly, trusting person. So, and this is a family member usually. So what they will do is many times essentially embezzle the money for their own personal use and leave the elderly person in a very precarious position. And what I've seen in the past is these cases are very difficult to prosecute because many times the elderly person is not able or not willing to come
their
forward.
Own daughter,
to come forward. And those are going to be tough cases. Those will be some of the toughest cases, but those are the cases that, again, are so important. They're the weakest in our society. I mean, we have to protect the weakest in our community. So I would like to set up a task force to deal with those types of issues. And I think we need to have some of our best and brightest attorneys on those cases because they will not be easy cases to win.
What other areas are you wanting to focus on?
Well, I'm biting off a lot with what we just talked about.
There's quite a bit there.
One of the things that I think in terms of the actual administration of the office is there have been in the past part-time positions created for lawyers who are already in private practice. So, for instance, we have some lawyers who work on dockets in Granite City or Collinsville or whatnot, and they are receiving a salary and full-time benefits for that work, and they're working 1 or 2 days a week. That's not going to fly any longer. What I would like to see happen is to eliminate full-time benefits for part-time work, and I'd like to have more full-time employees using those benefits. And we're going to get more time. I mean, there's a lot of young kids out of law school right now that really would love to have the experience to work in the state's attorney's office. And we can essentially put those people in the position for full time and get more bang for our buck.
Yeah, I mean, most of the defense attorneys that I know, at one point, like you, worked in a state's attorney's office.
It's because it's a great experience. It is your most, it's the easiest way to get trial and courtroom experience because as a state's attorney, you're there every day. Not always fun, not always glamorous, but you're there every day. So I've got a lot of young attorneys just out of law school who I know would love the opportunity to really get in and make a difference.
We are approaching near the end. I know we got about 5-7 minutes left here. Tell people why you think that you should be their chief law enforcement officer in Madison County, and yeah, it just gave me the signal. It's 5 minutes.
Okay. Certainly, I think that as the head law enforcement officer in Madison County, that you want to be more than just a lifelong prosecutor. A lot of people say, oh, but you've done criminal defense work, you've represented the bad guys. I have a very diverse background as a result of that. I'm able to see both sides of the fence. I mean, there's a strategy involved in both being a prosecutor and being a defense attorney. I think that is a wealth of knowledge that I can use in terms of dealing with the state's attorney's office and in prosecuting crimes. I also think that makes you a little bit more fair-minded and balanced. You understand why clients and why people end up in a drug abusive type of situation, or an abusive relationship, or how it is that people end up committing the crimes that they commit. If you have an understanding of where people are coming from, you generally can deal with their problems much better. So from that perspective, I think my diversity there is important. I also have been in private practice, and being self-employed, and I'm a single mom, you know, doing the juggling of an office is very important in terms of dealing with staffing. The state's attorney's office has 60 to 70 employees. That's a large division with a large budget, and I think you need someone who can juggle all the different managerial positions there, and I'm willing to do that, and I'm actually looking forward to doing that. And again, I like the courtroom. I really think that you need a state's attorney who is actively involved in prosecuting cases. It sends a message to your staff that you're in the trenches with them and you understand how difficult their job is, how stressful their job is, and that you're willing to take it on with them. And it also lets the victims and the citizens know that you're there with them and that you're not going anywhere, that you're going to see it through, good or bad, and you're going to help them in the long run.
And you're planning to spend some time with parents and teachers and students, and what's your thinking on that?
Oh, absolutely. It's like having a day job and a night job. I mean, I'm hoping that we can do all kinds of meetings with kids in the schools, after business hours if necessary, or during. I'd love to work with educators. I'd love to work with the doctors in the community and the pharmacies in the community so that we can start dealing with the drug problem. One of the suggestions that I'm throwing out there is that we form some advisory committees even now, prior to the election, so that we can get all the stakeholders and players on the same page so that we can come up with the best ideas to tackle different problems. And we can do that, you know, outside of the 9 to 5. So I plan to be a full-time state's attorney, trial during the day and then very work during the rest of the hours.
Very good. Very good. Well, it sounds like you have a plan. It sounds like you're about, you know, if all you got to do is get elected now.
That's right.
And then and how's that? Well, we really are out of time. I would say, how do you think things are going? In a word, good, bad?
Pleased. I'm very pleased. The community has been very supportive.
Good.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right. So we're about the end of it. Thank you very much, Amy Sholar, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. To the audience, I've been speaking with Amy Sholar. She is a candidate for the state's attorney's office in Madison County, Illinois. Thank you very much. See you next week.